one out of the way here. Why? Why are you running for this? Why do you want to be the representative here in the 43rd? What is it that's driving you to want to help the people here in this community?
I mean, I think basically your answer, the question is, why not the 43rd, right? I've spent my entire life born and raised in this neighborhood, went to school from preschool all the way to college in a 3-block radius, right? A 3-mile radius, literally haven't gone far at this neighborhood, love this community, have worked so hard in this community, whether in city, state, federal level, in the nonprofits. And I feel like I want to bring those experiences to City Hall, to Albany with me.
Now, when you talk about wanting to go to Albany, this was going to be an interesting race to begin with. You got the backing from the Brooklyn, Kings County Democrats, which is a big deal.
Yep.
I mean, it really is. It gives you a solid advantage when we talk about even any election, let alone a special. What did it mean to you just to get the backing of the Brooklyn Democrats to know they were behind you in this race?
It was important to me because, we talk about the 307 members who are part of county committee. Those are my people that live in this community, people who watch me grow up from a small child, people who literally watch me from cradle to this moment. So for me, it was really special just to have the affirmation of over 90% of those votes of people from our community saying that I was the guy they knew in the community doing the work, and they want to send me to be their voice in Albany to elevate their voices.
I know you're doing nonprofits now, but you have governmental experience, right? You work for a couple of different people.
Yeah, my career actually started in the state legislature. I worked for State Senator Kevin Parker. I was a special assistant. I would drive from Albany to the district, learning both the legislative process in Albany, but also understanding what it means to be in a community board, to be in a precinct council meeting, to work with block captains and block associations. Worked in City Hall as a chief of staff, and then worked for President Obama, my Brothers Keepers Alliance. So being the aides of the president and working in city and state government has definitely given me a lot of clarity on how public policy works and how public policy can radically transform people's lives.
And then you went from there into working for nonprofits, is what you're doing now?
Yeah, right after I lost my city council race in 2017, a lot of people thought you disappeared, but the reality was we went back to the grind and back to the work. Spent a couple years working at a program called Save Our Streets Brooklyn, which is an anti-gun violence program, helping to reduce gun violence in both Crown Heights and Bedford-Stuyvesant, and also spend a lot of my time now working at a national organization that focuses on criminal justice reform, both holding people accountable for violent acts, but also making sure our justice system has a fair pathway back for folks returning home, returning citizens.
All right, so you got the time working with the nonprofits, you got the time working we've got different governmental offices for different people. How does that all translate into turning you into the state assembly member you want to be?
Yeah, I think it translates into being day one ready. I mean, again, the election is going to be March 22nd, a special election. On March 23rd, someone's going to Albany to legislate. The question is, can they find a bathroom? So can they find a legislative hall? And for me, it's important to know that you have somebody going in who can find the legislative hall, but also be able to turn around public interest into public policy that's going to transform people's lives in this community.
How important is it that you're able to hit the ground running, not just in this particular instance, but just in general when you go and take this kind of thing to represent this particular district?
It's interesting. A lot of people talk about not being politicians or trying to shy away from that. I always say I wouldn't want a doctor going into a courtroom to represent me, and I wouldn't want a lawyer doing surgery on me. It's important to have people who are grounded and understand the public process and how public policy moves, and I think that's really important to lean on those experiences, but also lean on their community experience. Again, I'm somebody who's been a nonprofit executive, so I know how to cut a payroll and make things work and advocate for the resources we need for our nonprofits, but I also know how to turn public policy into bills and laws and actually transform people's lives.
What's your connection with the district? How important is this area to you?
Well, this district, I always say, is not just a collection of blocks to me, but it's literally the fabric of experience that shaped my life, both personally and professionally. I started my life here, born and raised in this community, went to preschool mine on Church Avenue, went to IS2 on Parkside Avenue, and got married in this community, met the love of my life in this community. So this community for me is just a big microcosm of the microcosm that is the state of New York. A lot of folks have a personal connection to their communities. I have a really deep personal connection, born here, raised here, live here, and plan on serving here.
All right, so you know the district.
Yeah.
What does this district need? What are your top priorities if you get elected?
Yeah, I mean, the three things that I think if I was leaning in is number one, housing. Housing has gone up over 150% in the last 10 years in this neighborhood. Number two is access to quality health care. It's not enough to have a health care card, but have health care access. And the other piece is criminal justice reform, right? We can do two things, and I think sometimes we try to act like we can't. We can hold violent folks accountable, particularly gun violence, but we can also reform the justice system to make sure that returning citizens can return home, get an opportunity, and be a part of their community.
All right, so let's start with that first one. Let's start with housing, because I feel like I talk about creating affordable housing with every politician who's run for anything here in New York City over the last 5 years. And we keep having the same conversation about creating truly affordable housing. So I'll ask it to you this way. Can we create truly affordable housing here in Central Brooklyn?
I think we can. We do that with working with local development corporations. We do that by doing at-cost development, which means working with nonprofits such as Canberra and the local development corporation of Crown Heights to create those affordable units. You can't keep giving those contracts to big developers. Big developers have their place in terms of airports and subways and other things, but in terms of the housing costs, if you truly want to make affordable housing, that is one area that we can really zero in on. The second part is working with our federal partners. Let's be really honest. The average medium income is a federal program. We need to change that to community medium incomes. We can work with our federal partners, but at the same time, make sure that we completely reform 421A, completely focusing on how we work with our nonprofit developers, and completely focus on how we work with local development corporations, and also tying in our MWBE communities as well to start building on those projects.
You mentioned healthcare also there. That's something that really obviously came to light with the pandemic and everything, and just how much work we needed, and especially to make sure that healthcare is equitable to people. What can be done from Albany to ensure that everybody has access to the healthcare that they need? Yeah, so right now there's a bill called the New York State Health Act that's currently in a legislative session. That is a bill that I think we can get behind. There are some components of the bill that need some tweaking, particularly the 20% hike on rank and file labor members of the unions. However, I think we can find a way to get that bill passed, making sure that we have healthcare as an access point, not just a healthcare card. Again, a lot of folks will walk around with a card in their pocket that says they have healthcare. When they go, the co-pays are too high, and when they have a situation, they can't afford to pay for it. Healthcare has bankrupted so many folks in this country and in our city and our state. We got to make sure we do both things: provide access, but also make sure it's affordable access. Brian, gun violence continues to be a major issue. I mean, no matter where you go, it's not just in this district; it's everywhere, especially in New York City. Mayor Adams has talked about it repeatedly. What would be your ideas, your plans as far as addressing it? I mean, as far as not just getting guns off the street, but making sure that the young people here in the district have a path to success.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking that question, because that's work we've actually lived over the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, we worked, like I mentioned, as executive director to a Cure Violence program. What that does is, one, it produces credible messengers in communities that help to reduce gun violence. Oftentimes, police are responding to crime. Credible messengers are getting ahead of crime, making sure that the crime doesn't occur. They provided a bunch of resource centers, giving young people access to jobs, keeping our schools open, and making sure that young people have a pathway not only to putting a gun down, but picking up a job, picking up an opportunity, picking up a trade. So for me, it's make sure we expand those programs throughout the community. We only have one in our community right now. In one of our precincts, we want to have that in all of our police precincts, and we want to expand that throughout the state and throughout the region.
You've been out there talking to voters, I'm sure. You've been out there. What's important to them? What are they telling you?
I mean, obviously, again, housing is a huge thing for voters. Safety is a huge thing for voters. Economic access. They see a lot of their small businesses, the mom and pop stores they used to go into for so long, closing down. So they want to know that the state government is going to be responsive, listen, and act with the same urgency that the pandemic ravaged our communities.
You and Jaylani are both Democrats. You have a lot of similar views on a lot of these issues. I mean, you probably would agree with each other more than disagree. But voters got to make a distinction. What's the difference between the two of you? I
think the difference is experience. Like I said, I spent the last 20 years working on these things critically, whether it be working in government, city, state, and federal, or whether it be working at nonprofits like Canva or Nazareth Housing or Save Our Streets Brooklyn. I have both the on-ground experience as well as the policy experience to bring the things together and actually advocate and fight. I'm also a uniter, right? So over the last couple of months, you've seen how we put together a really robust campaign uniting both progressives and mainline Democrats. And I think that's the kind of spirit and attitude we're going to bring to Albany. One that listens, one that leans in, one that brings our experience, and one that unites Democrats across.
And how important is it just to have not necessarily loud, but a voice that you pay attention to, especially when we're talking about representing this community and representing this area up in Albany, because it does seem like, there's sometimes certain communities here, especially in Brooklyn, maybe don't get their voices heard as much as they'd like to.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Obviously, part of our jobs as elected officials are representatives. We represent communities that oftentimes don't have the time and access to go to Albany and fight. So we know, at least I'm clear on what our mandate is. Our mandate is to listen and to bring those policies. I think, when I worked in the city council, one of the things I noticed was that when we saw a consistent pattern of behavior or a consistent complaint, what we did, we turned that to legislation. And I'm hoping to do that in Albany. When you hear consistent complaints about the rent being too high, about AMIs being out of control, and folks not having AMI access points in terms of what the average medium income rents are, how do we change that? And for me, that's what I want to do. Is I want to go to Albany and champion those issues that folks have been talking about for far too long, where there's been inaction, and also create a real partnership with other legislators to actually get things done.
One thing we didn't talk about is education, and we talk about what's going on with the kids, and obviously our schools here. There's a lot of talk, obviously, coming out of the pandemic when we talk about remote learning versus regular learning. Are the kids learning enough? Are they learning the right things? Maybe are trade school something that we should look into? There's a lot going on when we talk about our school system and our education system. How does it look to you?
To me, I mean, the first thing is we have to make sure, one, that we create high-speed internet access all over this district and all over the state. That is a digital divide that we've had for far too long, that people aren't getting access to quality internet. We have one internet provider in this entire community. If you can't afford to pay the next level up for internet packages, everything's kind of stifled. Folks are working from home, quite frankly, so we need to teach our young people that this is probably going to be the new economy, that it's going to be a hybrid place where you work both in a building but also virtually. So we have to make sure that our internet speed is up to speed. And obviously, there are billions of dollars owed to the city of New York for education. A lot of that could be worked out, particularly through 421A, which gives a tax break to people that are building affordable housing, but takes away that tax base from a community. That community then doesn't have those tax dollars to appropriate towards things like education. So we can do all and. We have the votes in Albany. We have the amount of Democrats in Albany to make stuff happen. It's a lack of political will sometimes, but I'm going up there to unite Democrats and to work towards getting to that finish line.
The other thing we saw from the pandemic were the impact that it had on the economy, but specifically small businesses.
Yeah.
And, you drive up and down any street here, you see nothing but small businesses left and right. A lot of them had to close their doors, a lot of them struggling just to stay open.
Yeah.
Now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, I think a lot of people just think everything's going to go back to normal. But a lot of these businesses are really behind the eight ball when we talk about trying to keep their doors open, and they still need help, and they still need relief, and they need support. What can you do from Albany to help those small businesses now stay open and go back to thriving as maybe they were before?
Well, let's talk about what we're doing right now, right? Right now, we're getting a lot of these small businesses in the community certified as MWBEs, women and minority-owned small businesses, allowing them also to get DOE contracts so that they can also provide services to our schools. We know that our schools and our government agencies are still spending enormous amounts of money. Our budget is in the billions of dollars. So how do we get them connected to those opportunities so that when they don't have foot traffic, they're still getting economic traffic in terms of contracts, small contracts to the city to continue to keep their doors open, hire people locally, but also provide the goods and services they've always wanted to do.
Brian, last thing for you here, we get ready here for this special election. People are going to be heading in there, hopefully lots of people, we'll see. But as people head in there to vote, what do you want people to remember and associate with your name? And what do you want them to know about you when they go in there so that they check your box?
I think I want people to remember I'm a working class guy, a guy who's always fought hard for our community, and a guy who's going to go to Albany and do a good job for our community, always listening, always learning, always fighting for the issues that matter to them.